Hello, everyone. I'm so glad that you're here, and I want to say Happy Mother's Day to the moms, add my voice to all the Happy Mother's Day greetings and wishes that you've already heard. We're so thankful for you and glad that you're here and thankful for what you've done in our lives. We're amazed by you, moms. We really are. And the longer I live, the more impressed I am, the more amazed I am with my own mom, and the more grateful I am for her faithfulness and her determination and her patience and her forgiveness. Since my mom is watching today, I just want to say, Mom, I owe you so much and I love you. And if your mom is still with you, be sure to thank her for everything that you possibly can. So recently, I ran across a Mother's Day message given a few years ago by Jodi Hickerson, who helped plant a church in Southern California where she continues to serve on staff. And as I watched and as I listened, I knew that I wanted her talk to be a part of our Mother's Day gathering. So I called an audible at the line of scrimmage, and today you're going to be hearing Jodi's words primarily. I'm going to come back out at the end of her message and teach for several minutes, but I think you'll be encouraged and challenged by what she has to say, and I think whether you're a mom or not, her words are going to call all of us to devote ourselves fully to Jesus Christ. So let's hear from Jodi Hickerson.
I just wanted to challenge us to start off today by thinking about this question. What matters most? In all of the things, in all of the areas with raising children, what matters most? I heard a teacher one time, her name's Christine Kane. She's amazing. She gave an illustration that has just lodged in my heart, and it has stuck with me for years. And she talked about the women's relay team in Athens in 2004. And they were running the 4x100 relay. And on paper, they were the fastest team. They were supposed to dominate. They were going to kill everybody. And Lauren Williams is sprinting, and she goes to hand the baton to Marion Jones. And right there in 2004, they passed the baton, but just outside of the exchange zone. And they were disqualified. Fast forward to 2008 in Beijing. Again, they're running this same relay, and when they get to pass the baton, they drop the baton, and again, are disqualified. And they're the fastest on paper. They're supposed to win this race, and what has stuck with me about that is it's reminded me of what matters most. That how we pass the baton of faith and gratitude and love to the next generation, that really matters. It won't matter so much how fast or how great I run my race if I don't get good at handing it on to who's coming after me. So what matters most in what we're handing to the next generation, to our kids? And I think that lies in this little quote that maybe you've heard around here at Eastside before, and it's this: who we are is more important than where we go or what we do. This is what matters most for our kids, for our nieces, for our nephews, for our grandkids, great-grandkids, the students in our classrooms, the players that we coach, the kids in our small group. What matters most is who they are becoming. And side note, this is the most important thing for us too. God cares more about who we're becoming than where we go or what we do. And so often we're just trying to, find God's will, where are we gonna go, what are we gonna do? And God's going, I care about who you're gonna be, who you're going to become. But in order to hold on to that as what matters most, we're gonna have to be intentional because, the natural pull is just gonna be all about where they're going and what they're doing, instead of being focused on who they're becoming. And so I just wanted to briefly talk this weekend about some practices that I'm learning as a very imperfect mom on how to keep hold of what matters most so that we can pass that on to the next generation. And the first thing is this: keep the end in mind. Proverbs 127, 4 and 5 says this: like arrows in the hands of a warrior are children born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. And man, I just love this picture of arrows, and I love this picture of feeling as a parent like a warrior, because that's how it feels, right, on a lot of days. But having this picture of shooting them out, and even just launching our oldest this year, sending them out, it's just such a powerful picture. But it's also a humbling one, because we have this incredible opportunity to aim them in the right direction. But in order to do that, we kind of have to have a picture in mind. We have to have a target in mind. We have to know what we're aiming for if we're gonna aim. And so often we can just get focused on, the everyday and what's in front of us that we forget that we're aiming for something. We're just wrapped up with where they gotta be and where we gotta be and nap schedules and what's for dinner and practices and games and all of that stuff. And while it's important to be, present in the present, it's also important to look into the future, to keep the end in mind, to think about what matters most. And that's what kind of people do we want our children to become? Not, what career do I want them to have someday, and so I'm gonna aim them in that direction, but who do I want them to become? It's about their character. That the question is not so much, what are they gonna do when they grow up, but who are they gonna be? Because who they are will affect everything. They're gonna bring who they are into junior high with them. They're gonna bring who they are into high school with them, bring who they are into college, into their dating relationships, into their marriage, into their future family. And God has always been more concerned with the human heart and who we're becoming than what the world views as success. His view of success is so different than the world's. God is not caught up in home run totals or SAT scores or flawless skin and blue ribbons. He just wants to know, are they becoming loving and merciful people? Do they act justly? Do they stand up for the underdog and the oppressed? Are they full of integrity and honesty? Do they forgive? Do they have a teachable spirit? Are they grateful? Do they have an authentic connection to God? That's the important stuff that we got to remember that we're aiming for. Otherwise, we can aim at 1,000 different things. In fact, the passage from last week is one that I've actually kept in front of me for years as a parent, and keeping the end in mind of who I want them to become. It's this passage from Romans 12 that in praying for our girls, I've prayed, I pray that their love would be sincere, that they would hate what is evil and cling to what is good, that they would be devoted to one another in love, honor one another above themselves, never lacking in zeal, but keeping their spiritual fervor, serving the Lord, that they would be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer, share with the Lord's people who are in need, practice hospitality, that they would bless those who persecute them, bless and not curse, rejoice with those who rejoice, and mourn with those who mourn, live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position, that they wouldn't be conceited, that they wouldn't repay evil for evil, but be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on them, live at peace with everyone. And wouldn't it be awesome if we were sending out a generation like that? Listen, when we keep the end in mind, when we keep what matters most in front of us, it begins to change everything. It begins to change the conversations that we have. It begins to change what we spend time doing, what we spend money on, even how we discipline. My husband, Mike, and I, we are so far from perfect, but on our best days, when we have the end in mind, when our kids screw up, and they do all the time, we're able to kind of shape them and discipline in a way that points to the people that they're going to become, not just the thing that they did wrong. You know what I'm saying? Like we're gonna lean into this because we want you to become people who know how to handle conflict. We're gonna lean into this because we want you to know how to own your stuff. We're gonna lean into this because we want you to know how to put relationships over being right. And we're able to point to this future version instead of just the thing that you did wrong. Another super helpful thing when it comes to keeping the end in mind is identifying some other adults. Other adults that could be in your kids' lives or older students, when you see them, you're like, you know what? That's an example of what I'm talking about. That's an example of somebody walking with God. And so I want them in our kids' life. I would seriously take some time this week and make a little list. 3, 4 people that you could intentionally have in your kids' lives. Can you imagine if every kid had like a few trusted adults that knew their hopes and dreams and were godly and they could text them when they had trouble, or the people that cared for them and prayed for them? That would be so incredible for the next generation. And then if you're here today and you are single or a young adult or an empty nester or a college student or you don't have kids, you need to be that person. Like, you need to be a part of handing the baton of faith to the next generation. Kids need you. Parents need you. Students need you. And I think it would be so incredible if we had a generation of kids that had access to loving adults in their life. So keep the end in mind, and then say it and say it again. Like, we've got to communicate what matters most over and over and over and over and over again. Like, we gotta say it 10 times more than we think our kids need to hear it. Because we communicate what matters to us. Our kids know that by what we say to them, what matters to us, what we think is important. So we have got to communicate that who they're becoming, man, it matters so much. They're gonna hear all kinds of things from out there. So let's communicate over and over again in our homes. Who they're becoming matters so much. Now, I think we ought to praise our kids, in all areas of life and encourage them to be their best in the way that God has uniquely wired them, all areas like academics and sports and art and all of that stuff, even brag on them a little. I love those bumper stickers that say I'm a proud parent of an honor roll student. I think that's great. We should brag on them. But I'm just saying, I'd love to see one that says, my kid got C's, but she's super kind, Because that says something about who they are. And we gotta communicate that stuff too, because again, it's who they are that's gonna go with them throughout their whole lives. And while all that other stuff is great and fun, and we're all in it, and you should be proud about it, the most important things are internal, and they're eternal. And so we gotta communicate that. Yes, praise them for soccer goals and good form in ballet, but always remember to communicate things like, the way that you handled that was awesome. I love watching you worship today. Thank you for being honest with me. I know that was hard. I'm so proud of you for doing the right thing. I really appreciate your grateful heart today. I love the way that you play with your sisters. We gotta say these things all the time, because it matters so much. Think about what the kids in your life, whatever influence you've got over a kid's life, think about what they need to hear, and then say it 10 times more than you think they need to hear it. Proverbs 4, my child, pay attention to what I say. Listen carefully to my words. Do not lose sight of them. Let them penetrate deep into your heart, for they bring life to those who find them and healing to the whole body. Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Say it and say it again. Years ago, I wanted to find a way to kind of say it and kind of put it in some permanence, like a family statement or something. So I wrote it down, like what I really wanted to communicate, and printed and typed it up and printed it out. And we've got it framed so that it's in front of us. And maybe that would be something cool for you to do as well with your family, is write out kind of a statement so that you're putting some language around it. But this is ours. In this home, we love Jesus, live grateful, put others first, believe the best, forgive freely, and dispense grace. In this home, we laugh hysterically, sing loudly, and dance often. In this home, people are greater than things. Obedience is greater than success. Dependence is greater than striving. Identity is greater than appearance. Character is greater than comfort. Honesty is greater than hiding. Imagination is greater than iPhones. Wisdom is greater than knowledge. And love is greater than fear. Here we eat together, play together, learn together, pray together. We also cheer for Oklahoma football and Kentucky basketball. I had to put it down. I had to write it out. But in order to hold on to what matters most and pass this baton well, keep the end in mind. Say it and say it again. And then if we're gonna have any chance in this fight, we have got to walk with God ourselves. Man, we gotta walk with God ourselves. I was on a plane to Dallas last week for some meetings, and not a lot of us have been on a plane lately. You remember what it's like getting on a plane and the flight attendant gets up and starts to give that spiel. There are several emergency exits on this aircraft, and it's forward and backward and some over the wings. And then she says, please take a few moments now to locate your nearest exit. In some cases, your nearest exit may be behind you. Oxygen and air pressure are always being monitored. In the event of a decompression, an oxygen mask will automatically appear in front of you. To start the flow of oxygen, pull the mask towards you, place it firmly over your nose and mouth, securely elastic band behind your head, and breathe normally. Although the bag does not inflate, oxygen is flowing to the mask. If you're traveling with a child or someone who requires assistance, secure your own mask first and then assist the other person. And I used to think that last part was absolutely crazy. Like, no, if I'm traveling with my child, I am going to help them get oxygen first. Like, I am going to get them situated and then I'll get my mask on. Until I realized, like, if I'm passed out, I'm not doing anybody any good, right? I gotta have the oxygen mask on first. I gotta be living this. I gotta be breathing this if I'm gonna help anybody else. If we want our kids to become the best versions of themselves that God has created them to be, then we gotta be becoming the best versions of ourselves that God has created us to be. And I just believe with all my heart that the greatest thing that we can give our kids, the greatest things that we can give the next generation, the greatest thing that we could give ourselves is a life-changing relationship with Jesus Christ. It happens when we walk with God. And listen, this is for me too. Our kids know. We're not fooling anybody. They know whether work is more important to us than worship. They know whether we really love God. They know whether mom and dad really love each other. They know whether you keep your word. They watch how you spend money. They've seen how much you tip. They pay attention to how you act in traffic. They've seen what you're binge watching on Netflix, okay? We're just not fooling anybody. And we're not going after, perfection here. So this is not to shame anybody. Don't beat yourselves up. It's about progress. It's about going towards God ourselves. It's about moving towards who God has created us to be too. And listen, even if this hasn't been any part of your story up to this point, it is never too late to start walking with God. It is never too late to make this a part of your story, to start to do things His way. I have seen it. I have seen God redeem families and restore relationships and rewrite stories and break generational cycles. I have seen Him do it. It is never too late to start walking with God. You see, what we say matters, but how we live really matters. So if we want them someday, if we're keeping the end in mind, what matters most, to be the kind of person who owns their stuff, be the kind of person that owns yours and says, you know what, I'm sorry, I was wrong. If you want them to serve others, then be an involved volunteer. You want them to turn to God when life gets really difficult, then let them see you pray and turn to God when life gets really difficult. You want them to be generous someday, then give freely. You want them to be honest and live with integrity. You want them to be the kind of person that someday would fight for their marriage, then fight for your marriage. Like, we all know how we've been impacted by this, right? That you are who you are and I am who I am in some ways because of who our parents were. And they were who they were because of who their parents were. And they were who they were because of their parents were. We all get this. In good ways and bad, we've been impacted by a previous generation. But here's what we don't think about that often. We are someone's previous generation. Every single one of us will someday just be a snapshot, just be a story about that grandma, about that great aunt, about that uncle, that coach, that teacher, that great grandfather. And what will we pass on? If we want to leave a legacy, we got to live one. And that is so much more about who we are becoming than where we go or what we do. And you don't have to be perfect, right? That's fake anyway. You just have to be someone who's willing to try humbly walking with God ourselves. Because none of this, all of the things we've talked about in this series with relationships and stress fractures, none of it is possible without God. Without God's healing, without His patience, without His strength, without His grace, without His wisdom. Which is why I really love this verse from James. It says, James 1:5, if you need wisdom, ask our generous God, and He will give it to you, and He will not rebuke you for asking. Isn't that good news? That we don't have a God that's going, oh, you're here again? Seriously? No, he wants to walk with us. He's in our corner, and he is so generous, you guys, willing to give us what we need to make it through every day. So let's pass the baton of faith well on to the next generation. Remembering what matters most, keeping the end in mind, communicating it over and over, and authentically walking with God ourselves.
I'm not a mom, but everything Jodi said resonates with me and challenges me. Aren't you glad to hear those words today? And will you, yes, grateful for her teaching today, but will you not only hear those words, will you receive them, and will you make a point of not leaving them here, but taking them with you and allowing them to shape who you are, where you go from this point forward? Friend, I've learned something about my relationship with my loved ones, and that is that thriving family relationships require renewal. They do. There is no cruise control setting for marriage. There is no cruise control setting for parenting, for family relationships. It just does not work that way. And there are too many opposing forces for that approach to be successful. There have to be resets, and there has to be renewal. But here's the good news. Renewal is more about trusting than trying. And that's not only true for parenting, it's true for every part of our lives. Now, if you're a perfectionist, if you're a do-it-yourself person, if you're a rugged individualist, then that sounds wrong, because the voice in your head is accustomed to saying, well, I'm just going to try harder. I'm just going to bear down. I'm just going to make sure I do these things. But if you're a believer, the voice in your head must learn to say, trusting is even more important than trying. You have to trust first, and then you're going to discover that your trying doesn't require as much, and it's going to be successful more often. Look at Hebrews chapter 4, starting at verse 14. Since we have a great high priest who has entered heaven, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to not what we do, what we believe. That's trusting. This high priest of ours understands our weaknesses, for he faced all the same testings we do, yet he did not sin. So let us come boldly to the throne of our gracious God. There we will receive his mercy, and we will find grace to help us when we need it most. We will find grace, so we will put our trust in him, and that will change the outcome of our trying.